Hi, this is Scott with Clasis. What we'll be taking a look at today with this video is how to dynamically add items to a combo box on your Clasis app form while you're filling out that form. In other words, say you're filling out fields on your form, you get down to a combo box and the item that you want is not in that combo box. What we're going to show you is how you can launch another form to add an item to whatever data source is supplying that combo box. In this case today it'll be a different SharePoint list. So in other words, add an item to that list and then refresh that combo box so that it shows up right then and there for you without ever having to leave your initial form. So to give you an idea of what I'm referring to, let's say that you have this form open in front of you. You're filling it out with, let's say, a company name, and you want to be able to choose a city that company is in. So we'll drop that down. Let's say the city that you want is not in that list. So what we've done here is we've added a button that launches up another Clasis app form. Now this form is going to accept some data from the user, in this case a city and state, and then it actually is going to submit that data to the city's list, which is what's supplying the data for the combo box. So if we look here and add our city that we want for our combo box, and then do a save and close, you can see right now that Orlando is now set as a city that I wanted. If I drop that down, it shows up in the list. And if I switch over to the cities tab, which is my list, and refresh this page for you, you can see that it was successfully added to that list. So what we're going to do today is just go through the steps that are necessary to implement that functionality into your Clasis app form. Okay, let's take a look at how that's done. So the first thing we'll do here is switch over to the Clasis App Forms Designer, and we can do that by clicking the gear icon here on our page, going to Site Contents, and then choosing Clasis. That will launch us into the designer. Now all of the underlying functionality of this process working has already been constructed, so what I'll be doing today is walking you through that construction process, basically, of how that was done. Now we're going to be taking a look at some data sources, but we're going to do that at a high level. If this is the first video that you're watching from us with regard to Clasis app forms and building in functionality, and if you're unsure of how to do data sources, you may want to take a look at our How to Configure Data Sources video first. That will take you through all the steps of setting up and configuring data sources. Okay, so you can see here I actually have two forms created, which you've seen both of those. The company form, which is the base form, the starter form. It has a text box and a drop-down box. And then when I click the ellipses, that small button, we launch up the cities form, and that's where we add our data to the SharePoint list. So let's first take a look at FRM Company. Launch that here in edit mode. Let's check that out. So here you can see is my drop-down box and my text box. And I'll briefly walk through the data source wizard for you for the drop-down box so that you can see that this is indeed configured to use that cities list. So we'll go over here to data source. Click the ellipses for items. You can see here we're at SharePoint for our source. This launches up our wizard. Nothing filled in here, which is standard. Here you can see that I'm using the title, which is my city name, as both the display value and the underlying value that we're going to store in the drop-down box. I've added a sort order for title just so that the cities come in order. And I've already added a trigger. I won't do that again, and that trigger is form load. I'll show you that in just a moment. So we'll finish that. Let's go ahead and switch over to our rule tab so that you can see on form load, I am actually filling that combo box with that data by calling fill data sync. So that's how the data gets into that combo box initially. We have one other field here that you don't see when I launch the form in run mode, and that's this one that I've got a background of kind of yellowish, which is called Hidden New City. This field gets filled in when I click the Save and Close button on my cities form. Now we'll go into that in just a moment, but what happens is when that form closes, we actually populate this hidden field with that value that I typed into the city name on the other form. Now what happens, the reason this is so important, is because when this value gets filled, there is actually a rule tied to this hidden field. And if we go over here to our rules section, let me drop that down. I created a rule called Update New City. So what I do is I call that same function, fill data sync, and that goes and fetches the data all over again for that combo box. So the fact that I've already added that city to the list from my second form, we know that it was there. You saw that it was in that list. This will go refresh, go get the latest data for the combo box. And then this action here is simply setting the combo box to be that value so that I don't have to select it from the list. So that's the key to having this hidden field, is that hidden field, when it gets populated from our other form, is what goes and fetches a new set of data for the combo box so that now we show that new city, and then the second action simply sets that value as the current value in that combo box. Okay, so that's really all there is to this particular form. There's not a whole lot of functionality that happens here. The main part of this happens in our second form called FRM City. So let's take a look at that one now. Okay, let me switch back over to the Designer tab. I'll go ahead and undo the checkout of this form since there was nothing that we've done that we need to save. And I'll go up here to my drop-down box, choose my other form, FRM Cities, and load that form. And I'll go ahead and check that out. All right. So you can see on this form just the two text boxes, txt city, txt state. These, of course, are where I entered those values of city and state when I first started the demo. Save and close button. The save and close, of course, will push this data back to the list, my SharePoint list. Close is there only in case I launch the form by mistake and just want to close it without doing any action. You will also see that I've configured a data source called ds_add_city. Let's go ahead and take a look at how that is configured. The first thing you'll notice is there is just an insert command. The only time this form will be loaded is when a user is filling out that first form, FRM companies, they get down to the combo box and the city they need is not there, right? They'll click the button, it loads this form. That's the only time this form is called. So we don't need an update command, we don't need a select command, we just need an insert. It's the sole purpose in life is to add data to my SharePoint list called cities. So hence just the one command. Let's take a look at that. Here again, I've mapped my fields to my corresponding columns in my SharePoint list. txt city to title column, txt state to state column. And as you can see here, my trigger for this is my button called btn save and close, which of course is this save and close button here in the background. Let's go ahead and take a look at that rule. All right. Once again, I rename my rule to insert city, but you can see there's just one action. And this action really consists of this functionality right here, execute command. Now, the execute command function is built into Places. It is used to execute data sources. The execute command function takes 3 parameters, and the first parameter is the name of the data source and then the command that you're going to be executing. So remember, many times you'll have an insert command, a select command, an update command, potentially a delete command. You need to tell it which one of those you want to execute because they're all part of the same data source. So in this case, we're going to be executing my data source called ds_add_city, and then we're going to execute the insert command. Now the next parameter here that I've got set to false is there simply to determine whether or not you want to show your users a message box once this process has completed. Once that data source is executed, if it was successful or failed, either way, do you want them to see a message box with that success or failure? If so, set it to true. For me, I didn't want to see that, so I set it to false. Now finally, the last part of this is really key, one of the key pieces of getting this process that we're demonstrating today to work. By default, that parameter is true, and that parameter is simply determining whether or not the execution of this command, execute command, whether or not this happens synchronously or asynchronously. Now normally, you'd want this to happen synchronously, right? Just go and execute and then be done, and don't do anything else until you're done. The problem here is that we need to be 100% sure that nothing else happens until that data has been inserted into the list. Why is that? Because we know that we're going to be closing the second form and going back to our first form, so we need to make 100% sure the data is in that list. So how is that accomplished? Places App Forms has yet another event or trigger called execute complete. You know that there's form load event or trigger, there's a form unload event and trigger. Well, there's one called execute complete. That event and that trigger does not fire until this command has completed in its entirety. However, the only way to get this execute complete event to fire is when that command is executed asynchronously. That's why that must be set to false. If that were set to true, then this command, or this event I should say, execute complete, will not fire. So that's the first key piece of this. When you set up your data source, configure it through the data source wizard, when you're done, this parameter will indeed be set to true. You need to set that to false. Okay, so that's the first part of this. Now you'll notice also that I have this variable here called exec command. What is this for? Well, what I'm doing here is storing the result of this in that variable called exec command. What actually gets stored when you do it this way is this part right here, ds_addCity.insert. Actually, that string of text gets inserted into my variable called exec command. Now, how did I create that variable? I simply went over here on the left-hand side of my screen, went to create variable, and you'll see there it is. All I did was come up here to variable name, type the name. Again, it can be anything that you like, and click Save Variable. It was that simple. So when this completes, what will be in my variable is the text ds_addCity.insert. So you could use this in various places. Maybe you're doing an update, maybe you're doing a select, and then you store the result of that into your variable. Now, why would you do that? Let's take a look at that next. So over here on my return to form rule, which again is what is called when execute complete fires, you'll see that my first step here is a decision, or a condition if you prefer. And what am I doing? I'm simply checking to see what is in my variable. So you can imagine with a form this small for this demo, this really wasn't necessary. But if you think a bigger picture, you might be calling different data sources throughout your form at different places, right? You might be doing an update, an insert, possibly a select. And depending on which action you're executing, you may want to take different actions in your rules. So this is how you can determine what was actually just called. So in this case, we know that this was ds_addCity.insert. So when this event, execute complete, fires, we're going to check what's in my variable. And if it is this, and of course, again, for this demo, that's the only thing that would be in there, then we're going to go ahead and execute the rest of my rule actions here. So the first one is, let's clear out that variable. And now this is the next part that is critical to getting this functionality to work. There is another function in Places app forms called setFormValue. And it is used for exactly what the name implies, setting the value of a text box or a control in a form. But in our case, what we're doing is we're going to be setting that field. Remember from our first form that was hidden called HDN New City, we're going to be setting that field to whatever I typed in my txt city box here on this form. So the setFormValue takes 3 parameters as well. It takes the name of the form that has the control you want to set. It then takes the name of that control that you're setting, and finally, what are you setting it to, right? So that sets that hidden field in my form called HDN New City. Now, let me take you back. Remember, on HDN New City, there is that rule, and that rule has 2 actions. So when that field gets set, when HDN City gets set now from this process, we're first going to refresh the data in the combo box by calling fillDataSync. And then once that's done, we will then set the value of that combo box equal to what's in that hidden field called Hidden New City. And what's in Hidden City? It's whatever I've typed in this box in this form. And then finally, I close this. So really, to wrap up this whole process, there's really 3 parts, I guess you could say, to this. Part 1 is when you're starting form, the form that has a combo box, you're going to need to have a field that you create hidden. In other words, just set the visibility to false. That hidden field is going to have a rule on it with 2 actions. The first action is to refresh the data in the combo box by calling the fillDataSync action, the same thing you call when the form loads. And then the second action is to set that combo box, the value of that equal to what's in that hidden field. That is step 1. Step 2 on this form, and after entering the data and you click the Save button, you need to, of course, push that data or submit that data to your SharePoint list. But the key part of that is when you add this data source and you're using the execute command function to set this parameter, the last parameter, to false. That's step 2. And finally, step 3 is you will need to run a rule that gets fired on the execute complete event, and that rule will then call this set form value action to set your starting form, that hidden field, setting that field to whatever you just typed in your city field, in our case for this demo. So I hope that makes sense. So let's go through and run this one more time. So let me undo the checkout here. And let's close this, and we'll switch back to our site. And let me load up site pages, which is where I've got my app part to run these forms. Okay, so filling out this form, let's add another company. Again, let's say that the city I want is not there. I'm looking for, let's say, Miami this time. It's not there. I click this button. This button launches my form called FRM Cities. There it is. I can put in my data. Now remember, I'm about to click Save and Close. So the first thing is there's just one action on this button. Save and Close has one action. That action is to call the execute command function to execute my data source to insert this new data into my SharePoint list called cities. Once that is complete, remember we have the execute complete event that's then going to fire, that is going to call the set form value function to set on this form back here. Remember there's a hidden field down here. It's going to set that to be whatever I've typed into this particular field. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll do a save and close. There it just switched to Miami. And remember, the first thing that hidden field did is it refreshed the data from my list by calling fill data sync. And then finally, it set my combo box equal to that value. So you can see it is now in my combo box list. And if I switch over to my list and refresh this, you'll see that the data was indeed pushed to that list as well. I hope you found this video to be beneficial. We are going to be producing more of these how-to type videos in the coming weeks and months, so be sure to check our website often for new demonstrations. You can find all of our videos at http://www.places.com/pages/viewdemo.aspx. If there is a video you would like to see that is currently not on our site, please let us know by sending an email to info@places.com, and we will do our best to get one created for you. Again, I hope you found this video to be of benefit, and thank you for using Places App Form.